Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, you are not finished answering the question that Trump posed in his tweet, which is, what is the cause? Where did all of this start? And you have a lot more to say.
Oh, yes, because that one tweet, we didn't say that we agreed with everything in it. And then we jumped right over to answering the question. But we all, of course, we knew Trump already has the answer to that question. He didn't. That is a Socratic question for the listeners and his tweet followers, and like us, because, of course, we do know that TAnon is true, and that when you get a T drop, that in between the lines are going to be the same kind of coded message to those who are taking part in the Second American Revolution, to take back America from those trying to do in our constitutional republic. So what we noticed is that he asked that question to awaken the minds of those out there who might not have asked the question. So where did this all begin? And as we answered, and we have actually seen a few writers, some of our favorite writers, answer this exact question. They took that tweet and they took that question and tried to answer it for the president. And they did a pretty good job. We did a good job, but what we pointed out, which is the same that the other writers that I've noticed did the same thing, is that what we pointed out is that each person involved in this conspiracy had their own beginnings. So you can't say where it began. It didn't begin at one specific moment, except for what we said. And we said, and that would be me and the mouse in my pocket. I don't know that the conclave or anybody else agrees with me on these next 2 points, but I'm going to say them anyway. What we say is very clear. His intelligence agencies, he had to send back to school, because once they testified recently, they were so wrong about everything they testified, and the mainstream media came out and said, oh, you say the opposite of Trump. So Trump called them into the office. We got to see clips of it, and he said he's taking them back to school. He doesn't listen to them. Those are the same people who are answering to the same bureaucrats called the Senior Executive Service, which is the status quo.
Are you kidding? They're the people that ran this whole coup d'etat on the president in the first place.
Precisely.
He doesn't need to send him to school. He needs to pack him up and send him to Gitmo.
Christopher Wray is now 100% complicit with what happened. So is Gina Haspel. So is Dan Coates. Because, look, if we can sit back here and give you all the evidence, of course they have the evidence, and so we're going to give you some more evidence. We didn't answer the question thoroughly, but for those who didn't hear that particular dialogue that Betsy and I had the other day, I'm going to repeat sections of it, but I'm also going to bring in a new character, because I hesitated putting Rob Goldstone on the list of true Russians. You know, the great embarrassment of Mueller's report. I think I'm going to write this up real soon to show the embarrassment of the things he missed. Of course, he missed them on purpose, so this is, of course, tongue-in-cheek. But the things he missed, like all the people he did not question, which I'm going to give you the list of all the Russians who he did not question, who were the real Russians, some of whom were assets to the FBI, to the CIA, to the State Department, straight on up to the White House. This was an equivalent, literally an equivalent all the way to Obama. And then we're going to give the president some advice about his supposed new suggestion that perhaps the Queen is going to invite him for a state dinner.
Well, it's rather nebulous, I will say, because it comes from one British publication that is citing another one, and it just says that in June that the two countries are set to meet for an official visit, and we don't know that to be true, but if it happens, oh my gosh, you're sitting right there in the nest of this criminal activity and these criminals.
Shall I address that
Yes.
since you've opened it up?
Well,
Mr. President,
yes.
I beg you, do not take that treacherous attempt at assassinating you invitation from the Queen. Because she had already discussed this before, and we told you the last time you went there, and we noticed that you didn't really take any food or drink that anybody gave you. We actually saw you ignoring them. Thank you. They have already stated, if Trump wins 2020, globalism is over forever. Because they've now been exposed, because they came out to fight you, Mr. President, and you have one at a time taken each one of them down. But do not believe for 1 second. Do not believe for 1 second that an invite to the Queen means that things are resolved. No, that means she wants to get you in closer so that she can either hit you with something that will give you pneumonia or a heart attack or whatever, or poison you or whatever. And remember, last time you had a man fly right up to you in a, I don't even know what you call it, but he came right over your head. Your own security did nothing. British security did nothing, demonstrating that you weren't secure at all while you were there. And even though you changed everything up, and notice how they made you change everything up after you had all your plans, so that you would be in a state of chaos so that you could be penetrated. We told you all of this. We also told you that we knew that you were coming to do something with Julian Assange. And then Julian Assange, now there have actually been no true reported sightings of Julian Assange. And he might have been the man carrying out the couch, as Betsy points out. But the point is, you're going back again, and now they're talking about kicking Julian Assange out again. Well, we have to see Julian Assange before we believe anything about what the Brits tell us. No, there has been no
proof of life. There is no proof that he is in that embassy.
Now,
none.
We want to talk about one of the last vestiges that they have. When you hear the death rattle of Adam Schiff head, and when you hear the absolute viciousness of that person, I'm not even sure he is a person. He's like a true British reptilian kind of person, and that's Jerry Nadler. And the fact that they supposedly have absolute visible proof that we've all seen about your collusion, which none of us have seen any visual proof of collusion. Mueller, and I'm telling everybody, the 40 FBI agents, they didn't add up all the money the FBI spent so far. I calculate $150 million to investigate Trump, and he's as clean as he can possibly be. And nothing has come out. And now they want to go after his tax returns. When Pelosi and Schumer Weinstein turn over theirs, then maybe he should turn over his.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is opposition research for any Democrat that's going to run against Trump, because they have nothing and they've got to find something. And who's going to do the Oppo research when Fusion GPS and Perkins Coie have all been outed?
And $62 million was spent by Perkins Coie paid $12 million to Fusion GPS, $50 million to Daniel Jones, ex-staffer of Dianne Feinstein. I want to see her tax returns. I want to see Fusion GPS's bank account. Because when we see who pays them, you are going to see all the pieces to the puzzle. Because we don't know hardly any of the truth. Remember, we know the Perkins Coie's $12 million that they were paid. A big part of that went to Fusion GPS, which paid Christopher Steele. He's a British agent, and Grassley demanded that he be investigated not only for his lies, but also for his criminal activity and as a spy. And what do we find out? Christopher Steele is one of our assets. And so here's the deal. The entire British intelligence and ex-intelligence, what I call this, the rogue CIA, let's call it just corporate intelligence or rogue corporate intelligence, both in Britain and in America, were working overtime against Trump the entire time from the moment of December 15th, 2015. Told you the story many times. Now, what we want to point out is that Rob Goldstone, which we did not go after last time, Mr. President, and Melania, who I believe has those 3-hour dinners with Trump, her husband, because why? She probably gets her intelligence from all the people collecting it for the Trumps, which would not be the 17 U.S. intelligence agencies who have proven themselves to be liars and cheaters and still haven't stopped surveilling Americans and who totally abused the FISA court, both international and domestic. Comey never drew down one single domestic FISA request for wiretapping in the entire time he was in as the head of the FBI. Mind you, did you catch that? So Carter Page's was the only one, and it never went through a hearing. And who was Comey's handler? Well, we have all the handlers right here. But let's just talk about the setup at Trump Towers. That was a State Department, Victoria Nuland, John Kerry, Loretta Lynch. Remember, this is the 7th floor of the State Department that Hillary weaponized and turned into a Emolument Act collection agency for the Clinton Foundation. Those same people, Jonathan Weiner, has come out and told us all of this. This is the reason we know it. We also saw other people jumping ship there, but Victoria Nuland has opened her mouth so many times to tell us what was going on, but nobody seems to want to hear it. It was Victoria Nuland coming up with the lie that a conversation was intercepted somewhere, which nobody has any record of, in Estonia. Someone talking to Lithuania, who were Russians, who said that Trump had been compromised, and the Russians have compromised material. That is the only speck of evidence, supposedly, and that is a rumor. Now, let's go over this. Rob Goldstone is supposedly a musician, and he arranges musical gigs. And he was working with a Russian. And that Russian is Emin Agalarov. And his father, Arias, is a huge Russian oligarch. So if you think for 1 second that Emin, E-M-I-N, and Rob Goldstone are not, basically, they're intelligence agents. So one of them, as a Russian, gets to travel all over the world as a musician and collect information for the Russians. There's no such thing as a Russian who is not a spy working in the Western world, who is a citizen of Russia. I haven't ever heard of one. When we expel them or when we look into any Russian in America, it's crooked. I don't see why people can't see that. So, yes, the Russians are bad, but we hire them. So the Russian we hired to fake the DNC, the Democratic National Committee server, that was Dmitry Alperovich. We're not going to go there yet, but Emin and Rob Goldstone are the two who started the conversation, and they're both, one is a Russian spying on the rest of the world, and the other one is a British spy, and that's who Rob Goldstone is, spying on the Russians. That's the reason that the State Department contacted him to get a hold of Natalia Veselnitskaya to have her apply for a special visa for her and for Renat Akhmetshin, who is a known Russian spy who is on the no-fly list here in America. He and Natalia Veselnitskaya are both on the no-fly list. They are spies, well-known spies, and they brought in a fake, a translator. And I have that person's name too here, but Ika Kavaldols. And so they come in being invited by Rob Goldstone, a British spy who's a spy to Russia, and they set up this meeting. Oh, but even before that, Rob Goldstone is in communication back and forth, but insists on being in text messages, emails, that literally go to a hardline computer that is in Trump Towers. And that was the entire intent of the entire sting operation, was that they already had the emails going back and forth between Rob Goldstone and Don Jr. And why was that? Because Don Jr. was an easy mark, and because this was a nothing burger. Rob Goldstone said that he had dirt on Hillary Clinton. Would you like to hear it? And Don Jr. said, yes, it's all in the emails, just read them. How do they get those emails? Robert Hannigan from the British General Communications Headquarters, in other words, the British NSA, had months before, and mind you, this means it goes back to March when all the planning was being done, which is what we told you, only people anywhere who told you that. The planning went with the Brits, for the Brits to cause these frame-ups, and on. We've given you 28 of them that Comey was involved in. But this frame-up was the one they really thought was going to take down Trump, because they also set it up with Franklin Foer. And I failed to mention this because they're not really Russians, but they were part of the conspiracy. And so really, they were seen kind of Russian agents, because Comey is the one who hired Franklin Foer to hire the professors at the universities to run across, by accident, a communication between Alpha Bank in Russia and Trump Towers. A server in Trump Towers. Lie. The server was in Florida, and it wasn't even a Trump server. The Alpha Bank connection was because they were trying to sell them Trump Towers all over the world, stay at Trump Towers. It was a commercial
marketing thing. And James Comey came out one day after Franklin Foer, on his second release through Slate magazine,
put out this information with diagrams and charts saying that all these professors all over America have all agreed that Trump is in direct connection with Russians who are paying him directly from Alpha Bank, directly to Trump Towers, and that at Trump Towers they have, well, they were going to frame Don Jr. and everybody who was at that meeting by, they never told them they had their emails, because Robert Hannigan had already come over through an invitation of John Brennan to set up a physical wiretapping through the Five Eyes connection where we share intelligence with Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and us. Anytime we need something dirty done in America, we hire one of them to send their intelligence agents here, and supposedly that's going to cover them. No, they're foreign agents, no matter if they're Five Eyes or not, so this is illegal what happened. And John Brennan took Robert Hannigan, we know this for a fact, on the day and time because Admiral Rogers turned them in and said, what are you doing? Bringing your FBI, your CIA equivalent into NSA headquarters to do a sting on the Trump campaign after the State Department has brought in Natalia Veselnitskaya and Renat Akhmetian and two other Russian spies, and Rob Goldstone, who I forgot to tell you is a Russian spy, but he's a Russian spy of the Brits spying on Russia, so how much can you trust him? And so they tried to frame them, and they still are, saying that that was still the only thing they have left to hang on to. Nadler and Schiff and Cummings and the rest of them, the only thing they have to hang on to is this supposed meeting with Russians at Trump Towers. Well, it was the Democrats who set it up. It was the State Department that allowed the visas to be issued to these Russian spies to meet at Trump Tower. They were already wiretapping it, physically wiretapping it. That's why they have the emails through the computers at Trump Tower, which was their headquarters at the time. After Admiral Rogers met with them after this frame-up, they moved out immediately and moved to a Trump Tower golf course to set up headquarters there because they were being physically wiretapped, exactly as President Trump said. Now, Rob Goldstone is the person who set this up with another entertainer, a Russian entertainer whose father was supposedly the Russian oligarch that they were going to frame Trump up with, or Natalia Veselnitskaya, who is in fact on the State Department's list as an active spy, and she's the Magnitsky person, and that's really all she's talked about. As a matter of fact, I don't know whether it was Jared. I believe it was Jared, after just a couple minutes of this meeting, said, well, this is garbage. We know everything she's saying. Everyone knows about Magnitsky and the fake Bill Browder nonsense that his lawyer got locked up and murdered by Putin. All lies. Bill Browder is one of the biggest criminals there is, both in Russia, Britain, and America. So why are we defending the people who defend him? Why were they allowed in this country to meet with Trump? Because of dirt? What was this dirt? Nothing was ever specifically said about what the dirt was. So when they got there, nothing was mentioned about dirt. So hello, what did the Trump team do wrong? They took an invitation to meet with people that they perhaps assumed that the State Department had to have vetted these Russians who came into America. Why would they need to vet them? And if there was dirt on Hillary, hello, there's so much dirt on Hillary. I wish they'd come visit me and spend 3 days. I'd show the tip of the iceberg and the dirt on Hillary to the Trump team if they wanted. That's what they were doing. They had already done opposition research on Trump. That was in the DNC server. That was given out by WikiLeaks. We already know the lies. We already know Fusion. We already know Penn Quarter Group and Daniel Jones. We already know they used Ukrainians and Russians and Brits, and it was all directed initially from Britain. Now, here are the equivalents that you need to know of why the Brits, we should do no business with them at all anymore, period. They're basically our worst enemy.
Well, we don't wish any ill will on the patriots in Britain, the men and women who are fighting for their freedom and liberty. We're really looking at your monarch and the oligarchs that are running this, not just America from Britain, but the whole world.
Yeah, they sure are. And that means our military-industrial complex, like Lockheed and Boeing, and no matter, SAIC, DARPA, all of it, Brits, Patent Department, Serco, Brits, everywhere you look, the Brits have the contracts. Get them out of our military, at least. and get the corporate intelligence out, and we would have more money and everything would be safe and secure. Because why? They're our enemy, and we're sleeping with our enemy. Now, Sally Yates and Loretta Lynch were controlled by Allison Saunders, who is the chief crown prosecutor for the Queen. Okay, she's on the Privy Council, and she is the one who told Loretta Lynch and Sally Yates what to do in this Spygate, because they are both 100% complicit. We know that because of the tarmac meeting. We know that because Loretta Lynch quit early, because of her threat to the New York Police Department over what happened with Wiener's laptop, and that she couldn't be part of that. She got out. We know that Arvinder Sambai, who we're about the only people reporting on this. We also pointed out that Allison Saunders met with the Orrs for dinner, both Nellie and Bruce, and hardly anyone speaking about that either. But when the head lawyer for England, that's like the Attorney General of America, goes over for a secret meeting with somebody in Britain, don't you think that's probably illegal? Well, it happened here in America, and no one seems to be talking about it.
And why do bureaucrats that work for the U.S. government even take these meetings?
Because
why do
they're
they
spies.
think that? Yes. Well, it's just a basic question. Why are they listening to what Allison Saunders has to say? Why do Bruce and Nellie Orr entertain Allison Saunders at their home for dinner?
Because they're seditious, treasonous SES members, Senior Executive Service members. He was, and he is on the Council of 500 that does the final review board for who gets the money for SES and who gives out the orders. So Bruce Orr is still not fired. He should be in jail because he literally, for nothing more than meeting with Allison Saunders illegally and not even telling his supervisors at all, but passing...
But don't worry, I'm sure Gina Haspel is right on top of all this and has already reported it to the president. And Christopher Wray in the FBI, of course he knows this is going on, and he's reported it too.
And when you want to talk about, say, Andrew Wood, who was the ambassador to Russia, that'd basically be the State Department equivalent of of Victoria Nuland. Because why? This went straight up to the top, folks. We're talking that the Queen's Privy Council's involved. That means the Queen has to be involved. And her equivalent over here was, of course, Obama. We now know because of Susan Rice's memo to herself that Obama was fully involved. We know by multiple struck page communications that Obama demanded to be kept abreast of this months and months before the election. He was running it. Okay? Now, on this side, Comey was his equivalent, his boss, his handler was Arvinder Sambai, who was, during her day, the chief crown prosecutor for defense, for crimes, but now she is the UK FBI, basically, liaison, and since 9/11, she has basically been a controller here for the FBI and their fake investigation of 9/11, which she did that alongside Robert Mueller. She was already called over and questioned by Mueller. No one heard about that, and some of these Brits have already been given get-out-of-jail-free card, complete immunity, because they came over and testified, and that was never leaked to the press. But anyway, Arvinder Sambai was the handler of James Comey and is now, of course, the handler of Christopher Wray, who has the 33,000 missing emails that were supposedly the dirt that they were going to give both at Trump Towers and George Papadopoulos. Lies. The FBI already had them. Eric Schmidt, over here, who's given $1.5 billion to Facebook to basically turn it into a more effective, or at least hopefully more effective, propaganda machine. That is exactly equivalent to Sir Geoffrey Patty, who's on the Privy Council and has been doing this since you can't believe when. Facebook is being controlled now not only by Lord Malloch-Brown, but also by Nick Clegg and Richard Allen. Why did they send the Deputy Prime Minister, after he got out of that office, to come to America to take over Facebook? Think of that, folks. Think of that. One of the most powerful positions in the whole world, and then he comes to take over the propaganda of Facebook. Now, when we're talking about John Brennan, you have to remember that his real equivalent in this particular Spygate British thing was the ex-MI6 Sir Richard Dearlove, who was controlling, of course, Stephen Halper, who we've already mentioned, and Stephen Halper was both a British and American spy in this. So it's not only sedition and treason, but he's also a war actor. He should be in jail right now. We already know he was paid $1.4 million through fraudulent work through 3 different federal agencies. So John Brennan's equivalent is Dearlove. Clapper's true equivalent as the Office of Director of National Intelligence should have been Robert Hannigan, but notice Clapper, he doesn't agree with none of the Russian investigations. Nope, he stands alone, says he didn't agree with any of them. But he said early on there was no collusion. And Robert Hannigan, of course, exposed himself through his NSA wiretapping of Trump Towers and the setup with the Russians and Don Jr. And what happened? 4 days after the election, he quit his job so he couldn't be questioned anymore about it, and they replaced him. Bruce and Nellie Orr were the spies on this side who were the back channel not only to the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, the Justice Department, and every other corrupt group that was working on this. And the person they worked with, they invited him to dinner and had hundreds of contacts with him, Christopher Steele, who is the person whose everything that he gets involved in is botched, Christopher Steele. And so to trust him, and he was a previous FBI agent, and he had, in Ukraine, we paid him over 100 times for the propaganda that he helped spread in Ukraine, where we spent $4.7 billion, according to Victoria Nuland, in Ukraine for 2 different regime overthrows, and that was Christopher Steele working with Victoria Nuland. So do you think that when they do regime overthrows that they can't do one here in America? And of course, when he first delivered those, it was to the Department of Justice, to Andrew Weissman and good old Zainab Ahmad, who we're about the only ones reporting on her. She was also on Mueller's group, and she was one of the first 2 people to handle the fake dossier, along with Andrew Weissman, who was also on Mueller's fake witch hunt. So they all needed to recuse themselves, get off, because they were in fact the criminals involved in it, but in fact they ran the investigation. In Britain, it's called the Strategic Communications Laboratory. They had an $86 million contract during the 2016 election to control the Global Engagement Center, which then faked itself as Russian spies and these Russian bots through the IRA in Russia and Concord Catering, all fake. That would have been the Strategic Communications Laboratory. We know because we've shown you the bill. And we've shown you how much they were paid, and we've shown you videos where people are saying they did this, as well as the prior head of the Global Engagement Center, speaking about all of these things. So that's their equivalent, Britain side, Strategic Communications Laboratory, not their subsidiary, the Cambridge Analytic Group, which they blame Trump for using, when in fact the Democrats used U.S. taxpayer dollars through the Global Engagement Center to pay the mother company, which is now closed because of their illegal activity and had been controlling elections worldwide for many years through a variety of means, which we've also revealed to you. So that's the British and the American equivalents. So when you were talking about the fact of where did this start? It started with Hillary and Podesta, and they immediately went to their friends in Russia and Ukraine, Dmitry Alperovich and Alexandra Chalupa, and they called in Comey and they called in McCain, and they went crazy getting every Russian asset that the FBI, the CIA, and any of our agencies ever had, as well as contacting our British agencies to do their regular run around the end routine of using the Five Eyes to spy on Americans and playing like that's okay because it's a counterintelligence operation through the CIA. No, there was no intelligence that started that investigation, still isn't to this day. Comey's investigations, which he doesn't claim were actually there, which he linked up with because of that Crossfire Hurricane investigation. He was already doing it long before that, like a fool, leaving a trail a mile wide as he did this, using every Russian asset we had, like Carter Page and Sergei Millian. and Felix Sater and Stefan Rowe and Ivan Timbarev and Victor Vesselberg and Simon Kukes and Oleg
Whoa, you're
Deripaska.
beginning to sound like George Webb now. I can't keep up with all the names.
I've already made this list. Natalia Veselnitskaya, Renat Akhmetyan, Dmitry Alperovich, Dmitry Savelenko.
How about Zainab Ahmed, who was on Mueller's special counsel?
Well, she's part of the conspiracy. I can't name her specifically as a Russian.
Oh, you're just doing the Russians.
Yes.
I see.
Maria
Yes.
Butina.
Okay.
Ika Kavaladze, Eamon Agalarov, Joseph Mifsud, who was really a British spy.
Do you mean that with all the money that Mueller spent, he didn't name even one of these?
He called in Joseph Mifsud,
but that was at the
early
beginning
on,
to make sure he was taken care of and out of the picture.
Must have given him immunity.
Are you telling me that two old retired school teachers in their spare time figured this out, and the CIA and the FBI and the British spy group, they couldn't figure this out and give it a report to Donald?
That's correct.
Because obviously this was a coup d'etat, people.
He named Mueller in his embarrassing report 25 fake Russians. I'm naming you 25 Russians who committed crimes that you can put in jail the second they step foot on ground here in America again. Remember, Imen's father, Aras, a huge oligarch. He was involved. Of course, he was involved in sending them over and paying for them to get here for the frame-up. And then you have Andrei Artemenkov, and then you have Leo Blavatnik, and then you have Bill Browder. I'm counting him as a Russian. He took the largest amount of money out of Russia of anyone except the one person whose name I won't mention, the Israeli oligarch in Russia, who takes the most money out, second only to Putin himself. But Bill Browder was third, and so Bill Browder, I'm counting him. He has he has dual citizenship, but still he's a Russian. And then there's Michael Alperovich, which people don't know, Dmitri's father, who had already penetrated all of our systems and literally brought Russian crypto codes to America and put those Russian crypto codes into our military and corporate intelligence. And this is all a proven fact. We've already proven all this. Then you got Eugene Kaspersky. Now, really, Kaspersky got involved in donating money to these situations. And then you have the beautiful Olga Polinskaya, who, of course, was a setup for George Papadopoulos, who told Papadopoulos she was Putin's niece. That's right. And two other women also, one of them was Mifsud's secretary, and the other one was Halpern's secretary. And then you got Igor Iganov, can't forget Igor. And then you got Anatoly Samakonov. Now, if you wanted to go into these, I went into them, what they did in the last time, but let's just say that though we can't say Soros is a Russian, we can certainly say Soros is a communist. And we can say that Soros has worked really hard to basically become a totalitarian dictator in the economic realm. And so we have to give Soros credit and say he's a Brit because he has friends. The Open Society has Privy Council members on it. You cannot say that Soros is not an influence in the Privy Council. You have to include him as part of the British Spygate. And you have to also say that he's the most communist of all. So his equivalent in America is Bill and Hillary Clinton, who gave away to communist China and communist Russia everything, and Trump is getting it back. And if we want to name who the IRA is, the group that supposedly created these Russian bots, the company that didn't even exist in 2016, and the people named who work there have already come out and said they didn't work there, it had been closed for years, and he's getting that from a New York Times report that was so old, 4-year-old New York Times report. That's where Mueller got that. That's where he got those names, and that's where he got the IRA. But we will say in America, there is such a thing, and that's Eric Schmidt's U.S. Digital Service, which was created to win the election for Hillary, along with the money she paid to Dmitry Shevelenko, a Russian, who was in India at the time, who wrote the template for winning the election. She paid through the GSA, that means our tax dollars, while she was Secretary of State. She paid Russians to write a program to change the algorithms, not only for Google, but everything, including Facebook, Twitter, all of them. And that was another Russian. We have to name Dmitry. I mean, come on. So we've named your criminals here. They're Russian. But if you want to know who controlled them, it was the Brits who controlled our intelligence agencies. And that's the part I forgot to mention, I apologize. I'm sure Melania has already explained it to you, Mr. President, because I'm sure, probably already knew this. And we knew this. We've said it before, but we didn't say it in our last report. So to answer your question, sir, when did this start? It started when Hillary Clinton entered Rowe's law firm and started stealing patents and drew to her attention Robert Mueller, James Comey, the other people, Capos and Chandler and
David
all of them.
Capos, James P. Chandler, all of them. All those people that were at the IBM Eclipse Foundation, at Harvard, they all were ripping off inventors everywhere. And now we are finding more inventors are coming forward, and they're telling us their stories of working with this group and how they too were ripped off. Without giving names, we've just heard another compelling story like Michael McKibben's.
Oh, where they stole, DARPA and In-Q-Tel stole a patent, killed the company that had the patent, instantaneously stole the patent and opened another company and made sure...
No, wait a minute. I think you got that wrong. I think that they contracted with the company that had this patent, and then they eventually crashed the company and stole their patent.
Correct.
Correct? They didn't steal the patent in the very beginning.
No.
In this case.
Right. And that person was working for both of those companies and saw them steal it and brought it up because this person was involved in this and was one of the lead engineers. And what happens? Oh, nothing happens. This is standard operating procedure. And who steals the patent? Serco, which is a British company. So from the beginning, in Rowe's law firm, they already had Sir Geoffrey Patty and Lord Malloch-Brown activated. Malloch-Brown was activated in 1978 through the United Nations as the second person in charge of the United Nations, went to Venezuela and made sure to put in OPTEC, which then controlled the elections there to try to control the most oil-rich country in the world. And it has continued to this day, and it's the same people. We've revealed it all, and it is an embarrassment that Mueller's report will show none of this, and it's great that President Trump is saying to all of the rest of you, when did this start? Use your noggin, figure this out. This is a conspiracy so big that when I have to change everything because of it, don't be surprised.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for clearing that up. I'm sure that tomorrow you will say that you want to take this at another level deeper, but I will say that as you were doing that, a couple of great articles came in. Trump just fired his, we don't know if it's really fired. He left this Secret Service, the head of the Secret Service, probably because of that little incident at Mar-a-Lago, of the spy that infiltrated over there.
Absolutely.
That's good. And another great thing is that...
Kirsten Nielsen is also gone.
Yes.
Good, she should have.
Yes.
We told all of you a long time ago she wasn't doing her job. She's the cause for all of this. None of this needed to happen. If she did her job, none of this would need to happen. She needed to declare the emergency, not the president. She is 100% negligent, and she deserves much worse than just leaving. And he said the next person is going to be strong.
And then Doug Collins demanded impeachment hearings or calling Mueller to testify. So he's calling their bluff, and he sent a letter to Nadler and saying, hey, let's bring Mueller on. Let's have him testify. Everybody wants to hear.
Beautiful move. Get straight to where they want to go, because that's what they have in their calendar. Only thing in the next 2 years is an impeachment calendar. We've already been told that by Nancy Pelosi, who's, of course, daughter of a mob boss. And let's look at her taxes, please. And then we'll see where the crime really happens in California. And we'll see the Mexico and Central American payments off to her, and we'll see her offshore accounts. And anyway, let's just ask questions. How did she get, $46 million in her account,
Well, I just think it's good because let's put Mueller up front because you know what? We've got some great patriots in the House now who know just the right questions to ask Mr. Mueller. Like, Robert Mueller, what is your relationship with our vendor Sam Bai? How do you know her and how far back do you go and who is she? And what is your connection to the Privy Council? Oh, we have a lot of questions that we'd like to ask Mr. Mueller under testimony.
Why did he cover up 911?
Yes, we can go back there. How did Building 7 fall again? Can you explain that?
And when he can't, lock him up.
That's right. So yeah, let's bring Mueller front and center.
Mueller was covering his crimes. That's all he did with this investigation. And it cannot possibly be sent out because these are grand jury secret. What do people not understand? Grand jury means a secret trial that no one gets to ever see any evidence. They don't even get a lawyer. The determination is already made before it even starts. It's a star chamber. It is a kangaroo court, and it only goes after the people they want.
But what's really great about Mueller showing up and testifying, either look, have him there or forget your impeachment stuff. But let's bring Mueller front and center, because slam, we walk him and all of this stuff right back to the Privy Council immediately, right there on the third question.
And it doesn't matter what they investigated. They did not investigate Trump.
Yes, and then
this was stated.
You can ask about your list of Russians and ask Mueller if he investigated these Russians. And why not?
He didn't investigate Trump. Trump gave voluntary answers to some questions. That's it. And there never was, Andrew McCabe, you liar, there never was an obstruction case opened. You are a liar. And Comey, you were a liar when you said there was no investigation. There was a CIA operation, and all you were doing was mincing words. It's just like you minced words with Hillary.
Okay, so thanks so much. And folks, if you open up that link in the description box, I'll put all these little articles that we were talking about in there so that you know that we weren't bloviating out of thin air. Well, we bloviate, but not out of thin air.